So thank you all for joining for the webinar today. This is a co-presented webinar. Well, first of all, my name is Carl Sand. I'm the marketing manager at Forward 365. And this is a co-webinar today. We're joined by a business partner of ours, a service provider based back east called Vitalis. And they specialize in helping customers drive adoption around software, new technologies, especially Office 365. So we invited them as a co-presenter for this webinar. So the topic today, and we are recording this, so if you want a link to this, we'll post that online and I'll send out an email message with a link so you can pass this on to colleagues if you want to review certain things that we cover during the session. So the topic today is around driving usage adoption for Office 365. Many organizations are struggling with this today. They've deployed Office 365, they're paying for the licenses, and what they identify is that everyone is just kind of remaining still just in their comfort zone of using Exchange and Outlook for all their communication and collaboration when there's so much more rich functionality in Office 365 to help improve productivity around communication and collaboration. So how do you get to these users and help them understand the benefits of using that technology and get the money's worth out of the licenses that you're paying for Microsoft for the broader suite and the different workloads in Office 365? So today we're going to have three presenters. We're going to kick things off with Carl Baumann, the CEO of Forward, and he's going to cover kind of what we've heard from the marketplace out there and some of the statistics that we've seen from other companies around the world for adoption. And then Val Vasquez, a principal solution architect here at Forward, is going to do a demonstration of our solution and show you how it can be used to drive targeted adoption campaigns. And then we're going to pass it over to our business partner Vitalis, and they're going to talk about their recommended processes to drive successful adoption campaigns. So with no further ado, I wanted to hand it over to Carl Baumann.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for spending the time with us this afternoon. Again, it's a pleasure to be talking to you about something that's very important, not only to customers and system integrators alike, but very much so to Microsoft as well, and that's driving usage and adoption of all of the workloads found within Office 365. So here at Forward, we look at ourselves as the market leader for management solutions for Office 365, and today we're going to cover one of our main additions, which is change management, which ties into workload adoption.
Are you guys ready?
Carl? Carl, are you able to mute everybody on the back too?
Yeah, so for those of you who have logged in, if there's any background noise, please mute yourself. I'm going to mute everybody right now. Okay, Carl, you'll have to unmute yourself again and then come online.
Yep. Let's go to the next slide, Carl. So today we're going to cover a pretty heavy agenda. Again, there is an Xbox drawing at the end of the webinar, so please hold tight until we get through this agenda and, of course, our Q&A, and then we'll raffle off the Xbox to that lucky winner. But we're going to focus really on 5 main points today. We're going to talk a little bit about challenges for user adoption. We're going to walk through the Forward 365 Change Management Edition, and we're actually going to give you a demonstration of that tied in with what Vitalis does very well at the same time. Finally, we're going to walk through a recommended process for driving that usage and adoption, and then we'll wrap up with Q&A, and then of course the Xbox drawing. So I think it's important to note, the message that's coming down from Microsoft and Satya in particular. In the cloud, the consumption is king, and as everybody here well knows, when you move forward with Microsoft to the cloud, not only are you getting access to Exchange Online, but there's 4 other main workloads that are there, plus Teams. And those other workloads include SharePoint Online, Skype for Business, OneDrive for Business, and of course Yammer. And the main point is, it seems that Exchange Online has been readily adopted. People are still very, very comfortable working from within their Outlook inbox. And the idea now is to expand that usage and really change the overall behavior of your employees at your organization. And as Satya is saying here, let's not only focus on using mail, but let's also how to improve usage for all the workloads. And then, of course, the financial results will follow all of our organizations naturally. Last year, Microsoft actually put a press release out. They moved their 100 millionth user onto Office 365. And then we decided to take a look at the million and a half users that we have on the Forward 365 platform just to get an idea of what the actual usage will be. Now, of course, this is a smaller segment, but I think the results may surprise you to a degree and maybe not. We see a high degree of our users really using Exchange Online. You can see here it's 84%. So users are still comfortable working out of Outlook through Exchange Online. But then if you look at the rest of the numbers, the usage really starts to drop off. Only 18% of our users, our customers' users that is, are using SharePoint Online. And then even less than that, it's OneDrive for Business at 12%, and then finally Yammer at 3%. So the message coming from Satya and from Microsoft that usage is low is there. So now, how do we actually change this behavior? How do you go into your departments or your agencies and get them to change to start using, what you've invested in with Microsoft? So today, customers are coming to us with 4 main questions. The first one is, can you help me drive adoption at our customers? Are there best practices for educational programs? Can I create an adoption campaign, or can I even take a step back from there and ask, what is an adoption campaign? What is that methodology that I need to put in place here in order to change the behavior of each of our users? And then finally, how do I actually do it? Is it live training? Is it video-based training and links? Is it something else? Is it a remote help desk to answer questions, when the time arises? The second thing we hear quite a bit about is licensing management. So besides just driving the adoption of Office 365, how am I able to actually manage all of the licenses within our environment? So if I'm a larger enterprise with 25,000 licenses, how do I make sure that I reharvest the license appropriately and making sure when I have my conversations with Microsoft about my EA renewal that we're talking apples to apples instead of having a lot of unused or unsubscribed licenses laying all over the environment. The third point is around improving admin efficiency. How can I delegate specific admin tasks while maintaining security? And that's both at the company holistically and even by department. And also, is there a new way here in Office 365 to basically update multiple accounts with a single click instead of going into each account and doing it one by one? And then finally, security and automated alerts are extremely important within Office 365. The data is now living in the cloud. So how can I really identify any potential security threats and remediate them quickly? So moving forward, let's talk a little bit about the Forward 365 solution for change management. So as you can see here, again, Forward 365 is a unified management solution. So we're really giving you a single pane of glass to handle these 4 pillars really well. And that's reporting, license management, security auditing, and of course, workload adoption. So I'm going to focus here on workload adoption and talk about what we actually can do to not only identify the users who are not using various workloads, but how do we actually start passing them through a process to change that behavior, to change the overall management found within these users. So what we do here at Forward, and what Val is actually going to demonstrate for you in just a few moments in conjunction with Vitalis, is really taking a look at the user activity, identifying groups of users and trying to change that behavior based on what workloads they are, or more importantly, what they're not using today. Now, once we identify these users, how do we actually set up adoption campaigns? Today, we're going to talk about how we do that using email templates, fully customizable email templates that you could go in, put your own specific message based on company, group, or maybe even department or agency, and then get the right training content in their hands. The third point we'll talk about a bit today is driving that workload adoption and making sure that we're putting a curriculum of training content in order for your users to not only consume, but to also work through in order to educate, to become educated on what workload they're looking to adopt. And then finally, how do we extend all this out and include some type of remote help desk to support the usage questions and even monitor the adoption trends? So at this point, I'm going to hand the baton off to Val Vasquez. He's going to demonstrate our targeted adoption campaigns, and then he'll pass it over to Vitalis.
So one of the facilities that Microsoft has made available to help assist in this discussion is the Office 365 Adoption Content Pack, or Content Adoption Pack, I think it's called. And this gives a typical tenant administrator the ability to actually see metrics within their environment and to really get a better understanding of how things are being picked up with reference to adoption inside of their particular tenant. The ultimate goal of this information is to be able to find and target different communities of laggard users and then be able to help assist them or to gain better insider knowledge around how we can get them using these particular platforms. And the business rationale is pretty straightforward. You're making a large investment in Office 365, and if all you're doing is leveraging Exchange, then you may not be getting the best value available. So by getting our users to come in and adopt these various workloads and retire other technology, which is a burden on your IT budget, we can better realize that value. So from this screen here, and to get to this, I just went to powerbi.com, and you need to go through a process of registering the content pack and associating it with your particular tenant. But you're able to see that overall message presented from within this interface. So I can come over here and see, well, 80% of my users have been using Exchange, or 62%, 63% have the Office Pro Plus installed, and then drive into particular areas within the content that's being displayed. So here we're able to see things broken up based upon the Exchange Online versus Skype for Business versus Yammer, and general adoption of these particular areas. You can even break this content up based upon the divisions within your own organization. So if you'd like to be able to see only particular groups of users or departments, we can do all of that by filtering within this content. Now, the interesting thing about having this discussion is that the Power BI Content Pack actually draws all of this information from the very same source that Forward does. So we both interface to Office 365 via the various management APIs, of which Graph happens to be called the Graph API, is probably the most prevalent in terms of providing this data. And where it becomes interesting is how we use this data in different ways. And to kind of illustrate that, we're going to come over here to my Forward 365 interface, and very quickly we'll just browse through the various metrics and attributes that we collect from this organization. So here you can see the master listing of all of the attributes and metrics that we're collecting from the environment, and make them directly available to you as the adoption process owner, as far as being able to see this data for your users. So here you can see everything from discrete metrics around how many Yammer messages have been liked, to the number of files shared externally, etc., etc. And you can either use this to create flat reports, similar to what we were looking at in the Power BI interface, or where the value really comes in that we're delivering via Forward 365 is directly driving these users into these other areas. So let's show you a little bit about that. So by clicking into the Drive tab, I am able to review any of the templates that we've created for the purposes of getting laggard users to start adopting the various workloads. And on this screen right here, you're seeing the pre-created templates that we have focused on different areas. For many of these workloads, you'll find multiple items that have been created. Here we have 3 for Teams, and they're focusing on different areas, or several for Skype for Business, etc. The one that we're going to do the demonstration on today is this one, the OneDrive usage adoption, with a specific emphasis on reducing the amount of email attachments that are being sent. So I can click into this in order to edit it, and then I am presented with the very same metrics that we saw earlier when I was showing the listing of everything that was available, that we can choose from in order to track this particular piece of information. So if I, as the content owner, am seeking to drive Yammer usage or Teams usage within my environment, I might come over here and say, I want to be able to track and monitor the number of Teams meetings that folks have had over the last 90 days, or the number of messages that they've liked over the last 30 days if I'm looking at Yammer, or whatever it might be. As this particular template is specifically designed to increase OneDrive usage while decreasing the average email size sent, those two metrics have already been selected for us. So once you agree that these are the most relevant ones for this particular adoption campaign that you're executing, you would hit continue and be presented with the users in your organization. And right now we're looking at my users. I have approximately 120 users that are employed at my company, Forward. And the first instinct by many IT personnel is to think, we're going to send this blast out to everybody because everybody should be using OneDrive. And while that may be a noble goal, in my experience over the last 2 years, that's probably not the best approach that you can take. Where I have found the most success in working with clients is by helping them to identify specific communities of users and then tailoring a message that will speak to their needs and goals within that particular set of employees. So in my case, if I stop and think to myself, who are the type of users within my own company that probably are not using OneDrive a heck of a lot, but have a bad habit of sending out large attachments via email because they're sending out PowerPoints and PDFs and Excel spreadsheets? Well, for me personally, it's going to be my salespeople that work at the company. So I can now create a specifically tailored message to those employees by adding in that field into this table. So I can type in the phrase department, select that particular attribute, and now it's going to interactively be added to this table. Once appearing on the table, I can filter against those users in order to show the 11 employees that we have matching this criteria. So we went from 125 down to 11. However, my work is not yet done because a quick glance through this shows us that some of these folks have properly fine usage of OneDrive. 9 gigs of data, 13 gigs of data, 84 gigs of data out on OneDrive. I'm preaching to the choir when it comes to targeting these people. So we're going to also choose to filter them out by focusing on those employees that have less than 100 megs of data on their OneDrive shares. And now we drop down to these 5 salespeople from the 11. So great. These are the folks that I have elected to target, and we're going to hit continue one more time. On this screen, this is where you get to tailor the message that's going to be sent out to these folks in our attempt to educate them around OneDrive so that they can start using that platform to become a more efficient employee. Here in brief, it's going to say, hello display name, and of course this will auto-populate as we'll see in just a moment. And to paraphrase, we've noticed that you have a bad habit of sending out very large emails. Did you know that by using OneDrive, you could become a more efficient member of this team? Click on the videos below to learn more about OneDrive. And this is where our integration with Vitalist comes in, where we are actually using their training content in order to get this message out to the people in question. Within my template, I can further drive this message home by automating the collection of the relevant metrics with respect to changes in behavior. So here we can see that we've chosen the radio button to indicate that we are seeking to decrease the average email size, and we are seeking to increase the OneDrive usage. So we're going to be able to see and track and monitor whether someone has gone from a bad consumer of OneDrive to a consumer of OneDrive who's now excelling within that arena. All that's really left to be done is to give the email a subject line, which will be communicated out in the email message, and finally to click Save, which is going to kick this off and send it out. And just before this webinar, I went ahead and performed this activity against myself. So we can see here the OneDrive email that's been sent out. It says, hello, Val Vasquez. We've noticed that you have this bad habit of sending out the large mails, et cetera, kind of like we talked about earlier. And now I also have the video content here. Within this mail, there are actually tracking tokens that will allow us to determine whether or not the employee has opened up the mail, clicked on any of those links, and ultimately watched the content. So just as we see here within that very ugly URL, that information is present there so that now I'm being tracked when I click into that link, and I'm taken to the Vitalist content within their Help Me Know hub that allows us to get trained. So at this point, I would be able to come into this interface and say, yeah, I want to learn more about sharing documents within OneDrive and actually play that content as I'm interactively learning from these videos in real time. From your perspective, you would then be able to track which videos are actually being watched and consumed and where people are getting the most traction out of. As an end user, I would have the ability to track my own progress, so I can come over here to my dashboard and view everything that I've seen, or even perform interactive searches against the data that we're presently looking at. So if I come here to the main home page, where I can either click into the various reference libraries, so here I am opening up the reference library, allowing me to see the various skills and curriculums that are available to me. So here's the information around Office 365, as well as Windows 10, etc. Or if I know what it is that I'm looking for, maybe I want to learn about how I would perform an upload to a SharePoint 2016 site. I could simply type in a few characters such as upload, hit enter, and then be presented with that content. So here I can come to my upload a file, upload a document, change site information, whatever particular element it is that I'm looking for in order to self-train or perform this training on my own without need of calling up the help desk and asking them how to do something. But I can click into that file, into that URL I should say, and then actually view that video interactively as well. So all of that is possible from this interface, and then ultimately learn and become a more productive member of my team. Now, while this is going on in the background, the IT person who's driving this campaign can actually see these changes and what influence we're having against our users. So if I come here to the Manage Campaign button, we'll be able to track that 5 salespeople group, the group of 5 salespersons that we had sent this off to. And if you will recall, it's this one, the OneDrive usage adoption, where I am seeking to reduce email attachments. I can click into the eye to view it, and this graph really represents exactly what happened, but it's a bit busy when you look at it for the first time. So we're going to remove all of these items and add them in one by one as we describe what they represent. So first off, we're going to want to see who received the mail. And I've got this metric referring to the number of emails delivered. And we can see that on the 9th of July, 5 employees received that message that was sent out that you saw in my inbox. And that didn't change. So on the 10th and the 11th and the 12th, we only sent out those initial 5 emails, and that number never increased, which is what we expected. Then we want to look at, of the 5 employees who received that content, which of them clicked into that message and actually read it? Who opened up that information? Because if they're not clicking into the mail, then obviously the subject line and the targeted nature of the campaign did not reach who we intended it to. So we either have to work on refining who this target audience is, or have a more exciting subject line that's going to inspire people to actually open up the mail. So if I click into email read, we actually had some pretty good results, where on day 1, no one opened up the mail. Day 2, 2 employees had opened up the mail. Day 3, 4 employees did. And by day 5, all 5 employees at least opened up the message and in theory read that content. So now they know they've been put on notice that they should be using OneDrive. So of the 5 that read the message, how many of them clicked into that content? So we've got the email clicked to represent who watched those videos. And at first glance, these numbers definitely could have been better. So on day 1, no one did. Day 2, 1 employee. And by day 3, a total of 2 employees before flattening it out. So we definitely wish more folks would have clicked on this video content, but the ultimate arbiter of whether or not this was a successful campaign is whether or not the OneDrive usage has increased and the average email size has decreased. And that is represented most accurately by this line item, is active. 0 employees. Day 4, we get 1 employee. Day 5, 2 employees. And by day 7, 4 employees met that active criteria, which we were tracking against. So allowing us to see that we have made those positive changes in behavior and increased the value of our investment in Office 365. And if I look at this table below, we can actually see those values borne out. And one quick way to do that is by coming here to the Is Active filter and then choosing to show only those employees where that criteria failed to be met. So we can see that for this particular user, the email was delivered, the email was opened, and he went so far as to click on those links. But when we look at the changes in his metrics, when we started the campaign, he had 4 megs of data on OneDrive, and he had a modest increase up to 34. So, could have been better, could have been worse. But where he completely failed to get on board with the program is in his average email usage size, where initially we had this size usage, and we went up almost 8 or 9-fold to 219K per average email message. So Marco failed to heed the importance of the OneDrive and the reduction in attachments via email. So what we're going to do is stick Marco back into the cycle and enforce this campaign. And what this does is it will take anyone who failed to become active and put them back in so that we can start the process all over again. I'm going to go ahead and set this back to all so that you can see that we're only going to be choosing the people who failed. But when I click on the green actions button and click enforce campaign, you'll find that we're brought back into the template, but this time, instead of 5, the total number of recipients is only equal to 1. I can open up that delivery mechanism and see that Marco is the only person that's defined. Maybe we caught somebody inappropriately and we decide to remove that person. You can always remove that person from within this interface, but more importantly, I can now come back in and recraft this message. So if I needed to make a change and say, my support team really wants you on board, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we can make that change and get this message back out to my users a week or so after that initial campaign. And one of the things that's important to recognize and understand is that adoption is not in any way a one-time event. It's something that becomes a continuous cycle of improvement as messages are reinforced within your community, not only through the use of technology as we're seeing here, but through soft measures as well. You want to put up posters in the hallway if you work in a traditional office. You want to have placards on cafeteria tables. You want to have various stakeholders within your organization using these avenues of communication. So for example, if you can somehow get the human resources department to buy into disseminating data via SharePoint or via Yammer, guess what? Your users are going to start using it. And you come to this point of critical mass where enough people start using these methods and communicating via them that all of your other users get pulled along as that rising tide raises your employees to these various standards. So hopefully this made sense, and we'll definitely be taking questions on the technology at the end, but I think now we're going to pass the baton back over to Wilmot.
Wonderful. So I'm standing between this crowd and the afternoon coffee break, tea. So I'm going to try to share what we do here at Catalyst. So thanks for joining us today, and Val and Carl, thanks for setting the stage for where we are. So as we talk about digital adoption in organization, one of the things we realize that the change and the issues affecting customers, especially the end users, is very endemic and to some extent becoming very costly. And why is that? There are a couple of things that are driving that, and we have listed some of them here. One, platforms are being deployed to improve collaboration, and employees, staff, and people are really not using the platform because sometimes the adoption or training requires, or the change required for them to use those platforms not being provided to them. So they are hesitant to take on the new paradigm of working. Organizations are really struggling to see the benefits. And yet still, you know, they spend a lot of money on the technology. They spend a lot of money trying to get it done as quick as possible. And yet still they're not seeing an improvement in the productivity or in terms of the collaboration of the employees. And then, you know, they still have to pay the software licensing costs. But there is another component that is also really organizations are struggling to work on. So they never get, some of them don't never see the return on their investment. So they spend millions of dollars and they put 20, 30,000 employees in their place, and that is not, you know, really happening. So just to quote what Gartner said, I think it was last year, it's about 75% of digital transformation projects are failing. And you know, to achieve their intended benefits. So, Carl, can you go to the next slide? I want to share why. And the reason why these projects are failing is a couple of factors, and one of the primary factors is change. The change is happening, and the pace of change is rapid. So what is taking place is we begin to see change is becoming the new norm, because now these platforms that are being put out there, for example, Office 365, is not a stagnant, stable, it's a stable platform, but it's not stagnant. Microsoft continues to innovate on our platform, continue to bring more technology to its our customers and the employees to use to be more productive. And so you have this constant change. So once you introduce the technology and the employees are getting used to that first phase of it, there are more innovation taking place to improve their productivity, and that change is coming. And people just get overwhelmed by that change and say, you know what, I'm tired. So some of them take on the change and continue to use the platform, and some of them just stop. So how do you deal with that? And that's where Catalyst, with our partnership with Forward, really excel in trying to help our customer be successful adopting those platforms. And one of the things we talk about, in order to be successful, those change has to be people-centric. The technology is important. The technology is what will help them be productive, but the change and the adoption of that technology has to be people-centric. So in our experience, we have worked with a lot of customers, and one of the things we found out is that there are some key roles in organizations that really help drive that change, and all those roles are centered around people. You know, you have the executive sponsor, probably it might be the CEO or the CIO or the CFO in your organization. You have project managers, you have the business owners. But sometimes in organizations, some of the roles that are not available that we try to introduce to customers are things like communication champions, communication managers. All of those people together are the key roles that really drive technology adoption, especially when you make that technology people-centric. Carl, can you go to the next one? So from Valor's perspective, there are some key recommended practice that we like to, when we engage our customers, we talk about. So for example, in order to get change going, what we found to be very effective is to strategize and develop a clear vision for that change, why that change is important to the organization. If you put that change based on the technology, people would just say, oh, it has nothing to do with me. But you put the people around that vision, why that technology is being introduced, people begin to pay attention because they begin to understand that the technology is to provide improvement for the way they work and how they communicate and be more efficient in their work. And then you have to communicate that vision. You have to prepare your people for the change and the adoption. And how do you do that? You do that through constant communication, awareness, doing some assessment of where they are, really getting them ready to say, look, I'm looking at everything that's surrounding you because this change is going to impact you in a different way that you have not seen before, because the whole paradigm of work is going to change for you. And I want to make sure I'm providing you all the tools so that you can take advantage of this new environment. And that's where Catalyst, along with our partner Forward, can provide you the data and the analytics that you need to see where your employees are and what they are doing so you can provide that change and the right message. So using analytics to see where they are and close that gap so they can be successful is very important. And creating and delivering that multiple learning programs. So it's not one, fit all. So it's not only webinars or classroom or video clips. It's a combination of different learning styles being brought together and developing programs around those styles, how people learn to be able to be proficient in what they do and be successful with the technology that allow the adoption to take place. Carl, can you go to the next one? So how does Catalyst do that? We have developed a methodology, and I'm not going to go through all the details in terms of the various events and activities that we do, but I just want to highlight the key events that we go through. So we have our first phase of the methodology we call Propel methodology. It's focused on discovering what is in your organization, and that is basically assessing the baseline. of your employees' population. And there are a bunch of activities in there. You would get the slides so you can read that and get some ideas what some of those things are. The next thing is to sit down and really plan out how you're going to get that technology and adoption program to the employees. And based on learning and looking at some of the data and analytics that you are able to get out of your organization, and tools like what Forward brings allow you to have the analytics that you need and the data that you need to put together the appropriate plan. And the next thing you begin to work on is how do you get people to adopt the technology. And there are some activities I will go through, putting the right kind of training in place, putting the right reference information for them to use, and then roll out your plans. And then the next phase of it is the whole empowerment. That's where the efficiency and adoption really takes place. You're going to create a smarter workforce. You're going to really create a group of people who are ready whenever these changes are coming. Now they are ready for this change because, as I said earlier, when we talk about the changes in new norm, organizations continue to innovate. Microsoft continues to innovate on those platforms, and innovation is to make all of us more productive and better in what we do. And so how do you get the employees to stay in that path and continue to grow is to get them ready so that empowerment can take place, so the proficiency of the technology can take place, and the way to use it is growing. So that's the methodology Validus has. There are a bunch of activities we go through to help you get there, and we can work through some of those things. Carl, can you go to the next one? So just, this is kind of an eye chart for you, but I'm going to try to simplify it. We have a lot of solutions in place that we use based on those activities that I talk about and the major events in our methodology that allow you to pick what is best for your organization. So as I said, we don't just come up with one solution that fits all. We really customize it to your culture, to the type of employees you have. And as part of our baseline, we will work with you to identify the different personas in your organization and how they use technology. So the approach we might take with the IT department might be very different than the approach we'll take with the HR department or the accounting department in terms of how we train them and get them ready to use those platforms. So there are various tools and solution sets that we have, how we approach that. And this is just some of the services that we have, and we can talk more about it as you ask us questions on the next phase. So I will stop here and give you an opportunity to ask us some questions. We have some more information, but I want to make this part a little bit more interactive. So if you have some questions for us, please, we'll be ready to take them on.
Thanks, Wilmot. So we're going to do the Q&A phase now. I've written down 6 actually questions that came up from the different people in attendance. So Wilmot, please stay off of mute. A couple of these are for you guys. The first one is for Val, though. Val, it's a technical question about Forward 365. Question is about how often the updates occur for the data that gets collected. So often does it pull in information from the log files on activity and what users have clicked on and not clicked on?
Oh, good question. So when we were looking at the tracking token information, when the mail gets received, when the mail is opened, and when any of those links inside of the email are clicked, those are effectively real time. Within about 90 seconds of the action taking place, if you hit the refresh button on that chart screen, you'll see that information get updated. Now, for the changes, for the changes in the usage of Exchange and OneDrive, that occurs once a day. So basically overnight, it's going to connect to that tenant and pull back that information. So to see the updated values there, you're going to want to wait overnight, and then it's going to be able to see whether or not there's more data living on OneDrive or there's smaller usage of Exchange, etc.
So Val, a follow-on question for that came from a different attendee. How long does it take to implement the Forward 365 solution?
The configuration of the product takes approximately 10 minutes. Basically, I send you a link. You click on that link, temporarily providing administrative credentials. And then with those credentials, the service creates read-only users inside of your tenant. And it's those read-only users that are leveraged in order to pull back all of the data that we have available inside of the framework. Once that 10-minute process is completed, you walk away, coming back to the interface the next day with the ability to log in and run any of the reports or execute the adoption campaigns that we've seen. So this is where it becomes more of a philosophical thing, because you could, in theory, jump in and create a little campaign like what I just did 10 minutes later. But I think that the real point and message that we were trying to drive home today is that there's a lot more to this process than just that technical cursory, oh, this is how I do it. And this is, again, what Wilmot's slide really focused on.
Val, kind of a follow-on question to that to dive a little bit deeper. Where's the data coming from that Forward reads? Val, did you hear that question?
I'm sorry. We're getting the data from the very same source as the Power BI content pack does, which is the Graph API within Office 365. So all of that data is being housed from the same place.
And when the data is collected, where is it stored exactly?
It's stored in a Microsoft Azure data center under the control of Forward.
Great. And the last question for you, Val, you showed online there during the demonstration the ability to use templates for campaigns. Are those templates refreshed or new ones pushed out so people can take advantage of new stuff for Teams or other new functionality from Microsoft?
Yes, we do. And this is almost a question for you, because I know that you have been instrumental in creating those templates. So if I had to guess, I mean, we update or push something out every 3 or 4 months whenever there's enough new content, or when, like, the Vitalist videos get updated. If we find that there's something more relevant to point it to, we might make that update.
Cool. And speaking of Vitalist, the next question is for you, Wilmot. Can you talk about a specific example customer that you guys have helped drive successful adoption programs and how it went, what the key learnings were?
Yeah, so this is a great question, and I think we got ourselves prepared for it. I think I got a couple of slides here. Carl, can you go down to I think it's the next slide. Yeah, so a state and government entity that we worked with sometime last year had, I think about 5,000 employees, and had deployed Office 365. And at one point, they had a really successful deployment and usage and adoption of Exchange, and that was it, nothing else. And so, in partnership with Microsoft, we engaged that entity. I think that the chart show you here is the Washington, D.C., where you can see within a period of about 3 months, we really helped them by a combination of services that we put together in a program to really drive the adoption of additional workloads. And you can see from this graph how significantly we did that. So, for example, you see SharePoint in the beginning when we engaged in April, they were at 2%, and by June, in a period of about two and a half months, we are taking them from 2% to about 15%. And you can see the same with OneDrive, from 1% to about 13% usage there. So these are the kind of dramatic changes you can see with the combination of Forward and Catalyst working together and providing customers the right kind of data they need to see where the challenges are and really executing a campaign to improve adoption and improve end users' adoption of the technology.
Thank you, Wilmot. And what's the ability to, so this is a follow-on question about the training videos that showed up that during the Valve's demonstration. Is it possible to create custom training for a company and put that into the same library?
Yes, and that's an excellent question because sometimes customers say, yeah, all that is well and good. You have that library with 100,000 video clips, but we want to see some of our own people. We want to see some of our own people talking about these things and creating a custom video for us. And it was like, yeah, we can do that, and we can get it into the library just like we have what we have today, and you can have your own people, part of this campaign, and they said yes, those custom videos can be done. We can have incorporated into the solution set so that it look and feel just like it's part of your organization as you roll out this campaign. It doesn't look like a outside entity doing that.
Excellent. I didn't know the answer to that, so I was hoping it would be that one. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today for the webinar on driving adoption for Office 365. It's time to do the Xbox drawing, so everybody cross their fingers. I'm going to spin the wheel here in the spreadsheet for all the attendees. And hang on, click over. So the winner today for the Xbox One is Tony Eagle, or Eagle. Sorry, Tony, I'm probably pronouncing it horribly based on the login information. Tony, if you could, please put your contact information in the chat window before you leave the session, and we'll get in touch with you to set up shipping for your new Xbox One. For everybody else, thank you for attending, and I will be sending out an email message follow-up with a link to the recording. You should receive that tomorrow. And appreciate your attendance today, and have a wonderful rest of your week.